This is the second video in our AWS Developer series, and in this video we're going to follow on from the first video where we looked at API Gateway for HTTP proxy. This video we're going to follow a similar path, but only we're going to implement a Lambda function proxy for API Gateway. The code in this video is very similar to the code in the previous video for HTTP proxy integration, and the previous video where we set up a Lambda function from a runtime jar. There are some differences which we will now highlight. When we create our API Gateway artifacts, we don't create an integration response artifact. Also, now it's a two-step process. First, we need to create and load the Lambda function. Then we create the API Gateway. We need to pass in some of the artifacts involved in setting up the Lambda function to the API Gateway code so we can use these artifacts when it creates the Lambda proxy. Our low-level view now looks like this. We have the method request to integration request as before, but there is no integration response. Also, our Lambda function is now internal inside the AWS stack. We will need an IAM role for our Lambda function. Let's call it a Lambda role. We will need that to pass in when we construct our Lambda function. Previously, we constructed a Lambda handler function using a Kinesis event and the associated JSON. For this Lambda integration API Gateway, we will need to implement an API Gateway handler. This is a link to our API Gateway handler code. At a high level, our API Gateway Lambda handler must be set up with generics to handle the API Gateway type, so it has a proxy request event coming in and a proxy response event going out. Handler function handles the proxy request event input. We can extract the parameters we want, and then we must return an API proxy response event. This is a code that implements our handler function. API Gateway provides high levels of security, but it's a good idea to implement some sort of check inside your handler function as well. Here we have a very simple scheme where we have an MD5 hash of a token. In this test, this serves to check more that we have our dependencies set up correctly, that our shadow jar has packaged all the dependencies such as Apache codec library for the digest utils, and the crypto class that is compiled and packaged along with our handler class. Here we have an IAM role, and I have commented out the account number. With our role, we pass it into our function request. When we create the Lambda integration, we need to access underlying parameters such as the ARN for the Lambda's role. SDK provides this method get function, and with this and the function name, we can get the configuration data, and we need to call this function inside our setup code. When we set up our API Gateway with this Lambda function integration, it's going to be a two-step process. The first step is to have a function that encapsulates first building and deploying a Lambda function, then getting the configuration values for that function. Once we've deployed the function and returned its configuration data, we can pass that into another function that encapsulates all the setup code for the API Gateway. So we pass the Lambda function configuration data into the code. The advantages of this is that it allows us to spin everything up that's involved with the test, the Lambda function and the API Gateway, and then tear it down. Now we're in a position to run the test first against Localstack, get all the bugs out, and then run it on AWS. As before, we start by booting up Localstack, which we have set up to run the services Lambda and API Gateway. So we check that those services booted up successfully, and Localstack tells us it's ready. Localstack is ready, so we will follow the same procedure as we followed with the HTTP integration. So we comment out our HTTP test and set up our Lambda proxy test. So we need to set the Localstack configuration variable. Now we're ready to run our code from source. So the code is running. It's going to go through, deploy the Lambda function, set up the API Gateway, print out our test URI according to the scheme. Now we check using the endpoint for Localstack. We list the functions. We see we've created our Lambda function. To check that we set up our REST API. We see that we set up our API. So we set up our function and our API Gateway successfully against Localstack. Now we reset our code to set the Boolean variable So the code runs against Amazon. So is Localstack test is now false for both methods. Now when we run this main method, it will repeat the test but on the AWS infrastructure. So everything should work out because it worked on Localstack. So this is test-driven development. So we can set up a rig where we create these integrations with API Gateway Lambda functions. We can spin them up and tear them down quickly and easily. Code is printed out our URI we can run to test the API Gateway integration. But now we have set this up as a post method, so we cannot run it in the browser. We need to use curl. So we run curl with a post and a correctly formatted URI according to the scheme. Our JSON payload contains the hash of a token, which we will check with the digest utils in the Lambda function. Around the post, the token was authenticated. Now we will use the CLI as before to check all the artifacts were created successfully on AWS. It can be a lot quicker, especially in repeated testing, to use the CLI rather than the console. And here we can see REST API part was set up correctly. Next we will check the functions, so we list the Lambda functions and we check that our Lambda function was also set up correctly. We know everything worked because we ran the curl test. So if we go to the console now, out of interest, and have a look at how the API Gateway set up everything, go to our integrations, and we can see we have set up our Lambda integration, our Lambda Proxy successfully. For the Lambda Proxy, we don't implement an integration response, just a method response. Now we will use the console to have a look at how our Lambda function appears. So we look for our Lambda service in the search, find our Lambda service, we look and see if our Lambda function is set up there for us. So we see Lambda function, Gateway Proxy test. After these tests, it's pretty important that we don't forget to clean up everything on AWS. We can use the console to do that, but it's a lot quicker to use the CLI. We delete the Lambda function with the Lambda function name. We delete the REST API with the REST API ID. You can dig more into the details of the code with the GitHub link. The main thrust of this video was to show how you can perform test-driven development with Localstack for setting up software as a service type code, API Gateway with Lambda integration on AWS.